Hello, I'm Megan Ludke.
Good evening. I'm Jens Springsjord. This is Design Atlas.
Tonight,
Crafting a comeback. After 8 months of self-reflection and creative reinvention, we at the Design Atlas podcast are back, bolder, fresher, and ready to inspire.
a journey to the edge of the world. Jack Bailey, an internationally acclaimed landscape photographer, recently ventured into the remote Himalayas on nothing but a motorcycle and a horse, capturing the breathtaking landscapes that are as daring as they are stunning.
Email the Timeless Connection. At the London Design Museum, we explore an exhibit that celebrates the enduring power of email, reminding us that it's more than just a tool. It's a dynamic force for connection and creativity.
Cleaning off the dust. We'll meet with a creative studio that's turning the dust of everyday life into stunning ceramic glazes, proving that even sawdust can have a second life as art.
And the flags wave. Our dive into their evolution shows just how these digital symbols are reshaping how we express identity and connection, all while revealing that the days of adding or changing emoji flags are officially over. Design Atlas, the January 2nd edition, the podcast that's ready to mark its territory with a flag that can't be changed. Hold on to your sketchbook because the Design Atlas podcast is back. It's great. I'm really glad to be back in the studio and finally recording again. After an 8-month creative sabbatical, some self-reflection, a bit of yoga, maybe some deep breathing, we've reimagined our show with a fresh new format, and we are so excited to share it. The plan is to bring in multiple guests, yep, you heard that right, multiple guests per episode, and sprinkle in some narrative-driven stories that dive deep into diverse and interesting design topics. Think of it as like a design studio brainstorming session, where new ideas come together to create something truly unique. And as you're perhaps sipping some of that coffee, you'll be listening to stories and narratives that will make you think, laugh, and maybe even question if Comic Sans deserves all that hate.
And let's talk timing, because design is all about precision, right? We're setting our bi-weekly episodes to drop Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Consider it your pre-weekend mood board for inspiration. It's like happy hour, but instead of those cocktails, we're serving up creativity with a side of clever inspiration. So don't forget to pencil us into your calendar, because no designer can resist a good schedule. And we know it's been a hot minute since our last episode. Okay, maybe more like 8 months, but absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? So dust off those headphones, click subscribe, and join us as we bring the Design Atlas podcast to exciting new heights. Hit it, Jens.
Picture this. A rugged motorcycle, maybe a horse or two, the towering peaks of the Himalayas, and a photographer so daring he makes Indiana Jones look like a weekend tourist. That's Jack Bailey for you. With his latest jaw-dropping collection, Jack has taken landscape photography to dizzying new heights, literally. But don't be fooled, he's quick to remind us that his creative fuel tank is far from empty. Known for blending raw natural beauty with abstract emotion, Jack's work feels less like a snapshot and more like a soul whisper. His self taught rule breaking approach has earned him international acclaim and inspired a new generation of photographers to ditch that rule book in favor of raw creativity. We caught up with Jack to talk about his Himalayan adventure, what it's like to balance on the edge of the world and a motorcycle seat, and how he turns landscapes into deeply personal stories. We reached Jack in Guadalajara, Mexico.
One of the reasons we brought you on the show to chat today is to talk about some of your adventures. Specifically, we found your adventures into the Himalayas via motorcycle and the photos that you captured there. Could you give our listeners just an overview of like why you went into that and what that trip entailed?
Yeah, of course. So initially, I went to the Himalayas 4 years ago, and it was kind of a response to initially the pandemic. And at a similar time in Byron Bay, where I live, we had these wild floods that wiped out a fair bit of the few of the towns out there, and became quite a big issue. And there was not much government support, so the community found ourselves rallying and getting a lot of the work done ourselves, like digging people's pets out of mudslides and swimming across swollen rivers to set up zip lines. And that kind of went on for about a month. And at the same time, I was winding down a relationship that should have ended quite a while ago and was kind of dragging through the
Hmm.
mud. So I was just completely emotionally and physically spent from that kind of 2 years prior to that. And I had not much else to offer, and I was kind of really impacting on my work, and was rendering my vision really completely suffocating my vision. So I had no
Hmm.
clarity of focus whatsoever, and there was so much I need to process that I couldn't even really see 3 feet in front of my own nose. And I knew I needed a place that put myself in completely unfamiliar surrounds and somewhere I could take the time to process and shake off all that mold that infested
Hmm.
on my being. I also wanted to land somewhere that had offered complete expansion to really recalibrate my perspective and widen my vision and get that kind of free thought back.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to also indulge in this feeling of insignificance, and I couldn't really think of anywhere that I'd feel smaller than the Himalayas. And I've recently just returned from the Western Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau, which was more the motorcycle and horseback section
Hmm.
of that to expand into that body of work.
Wow. So, how long did you go to the Himalayas, or how many times have you been since that first trip?
This is my second trip. The first
Mhm.
trip, I think it was about an 8-week trip and 6 weeks hiking and shooting. Then this trip was 3 months, 10 days horseback, and then the rest of the time was on a motorcycle camping and shooting,
Mhm.
which was pretty
Wow.
arduous. It was hard
Yeah.
work, to be
Yeah,
honest.
that's a lot. How do you prepare for a trip of that scale, and what sort of things do you need to consider in that?
To be honest, I'm horrible at preparation and research.
Yeah.
I tend to just kind of pick a spot and head into it. I mean, I'll do the basic research, like
Yeah.
temperatures and what I'm actually going to need to kind of survive. But more than that, I kind of go in blind because I really go off the ethos that kind of going in unknown, you're way more open to surprise. And a little bit of
Mhm.
fear and anxiety is a really good carrot to kind of chase. It's not. I think becoming too comfortable, you become complacent. I think
Yeah.
that for me, going into the unknown shakes that off a little bit more.
So, I mean, as you can imagine, like riding a motorcycle at the high altitudes, and I'm sure that there's all kinds of obstacles that you run into in that. What are some of the like logistical and physical demands of traveling and working and photographing a journey like this through the Himalayas?
Yeah, that was a big struggle for me on this one because it's impossible to rent a car up on this side, so that renders that completely irrelevant. The horseback
Mhm.
was presented its own challenges.
Had you ever ridden a horse prior to that?
I had when I was a child, but
Yeah.
I definitely was going into it a little bit. Again, I'm underprepared, but I had some really good people with me,
Yeah.
so they
How many
kind of.
people did you have?
There was about 5 other people on this trek.
Yeah.
So there was a horse wrangler who knew everything he was doing, and there was some other people involved in the trek as well. So it wasn't that part of it wasn't completely alone, which thank God, because I
Mhm.
would have perished on that one for sure. But yeah, the motorcycle side of it was definitely a little bit trickier. As I said, you can't really rent a car. So you're packing up, you've got one little luggage case on the back of your motorcycle, and you're packing up camping gear, cooking gear. And then on the top of that, you've got your camera gear, which adds a whole different dimension. And then every time you're shooting, you're pulling all the gear off, putting it back on. So it becomes quite an arduous task. And then I think I dropped the bike probably 5 or 6 times out of exhaustion
Oh
trying to
boy.
ride it,
Yeah.
but nothing savage,
Mhm.
just kind of silly, clumsy drops, you know. But
Yeah.
it definitely it was an eye opener. The roads over there are quite wild.
Yeah, I'm sure it's incredibly exhausting, on your body, mentally and physically.
Yeah, but it's in such a beautiful space, you know, that you can't really complain.
Of course, yeah, it sounds incredible. So, you're out in the wilderness, you're out in the wilds. Did you have to deal with any unpredictable weather and terrain or other things? And did that, like, influence your mentality and also just, like, the tone of your photography?
Yeah, I think I mean traditionally with landscape photography, it is such a unpredictable. You're dealing the with nature, which is such an unpredictable being in itself. So I think there was a lot over there because being on the motorcycle, you're completely exposed to the elements, and the distances between locations were so large and so vast that it wasn't simply kind of pull off into a gas station. You know what I mean? It was you were stuck out there
Mhm.
by yourself. So if a big storm came through, you just had to bear the brunt of it. And the worst thing over there I found was the heat. It was hot, and
Wow.
it's kind of the desert. It's the desert side of the Himalayas, so
Oh,
trying to escape
jeez.
the sun as well, where you've only got the motorcycle. I was shooting a lot of time lapse and kind of long video shots, and I found myself like lying under the motorcycle, just trying to get out of the sun for moments that I could. But then the night it would get radically cold, and you'd be
Mhm.
camping, so it was a constant battle with the elements, and then that of course affects your psyche. But then I think that lining up, kind of capturing the elements in the right moment and injecting your kind of headspace at that time and combining those and then the amalgamation of those two things is what creates the atmosphere, I suppose. So
So, can you describe for our listeners sort of a location on the route that sort of left you awestruck or like deeply impacted your creative process?
the Tibetan plateau, which kind of lies up towards the top part of that whole area, is quite untouched still, and the nomads are still roaming around out there doing their
Mhm.
traditional herding and stuff. So I think the spaces like that really kind of impacted me on the solitude and the expansive spaces out there really kind of impacted on me. And I think
Yeah.
I shot everything a lot wider than I normally do on
Mhm.
this because the spaces were so large, and I wanted to kind of really embrace that feeling of emptiness. So I mean, literally every location out there was mind-bendingly beautiful.
I believe it. Could you describe like what those landscapes look like for those who haven't seen it? Like what were how many trees were there? Was it desert? Was there snow? Was it like
Sure.
what was the environment that you were in?
Well, I traveled the whole of Ladakh, which is huge, but so it was very diverse, but the majority of it was desert. So long desert plains, zero trees, and then kind of beautiful bulbous rolling hills, kind of rolling up into like these jagged, sharp peaks through these valleys. But everything had these beautifully bleached colors and very organic kind of shapes and tones. And then there'd be these almost metallic colored rocks kind of popping out of the sides of mountains where these ores and different minerals would be affecting the earth. It was kind of amalgamation of everything, you know, beautiful shapes and tones, but everything was completely desolate.
So, for, anyone out there, what advice would you offer to sort of aspiring photographers to explore remote and challenging terrains for their work?
The biggest advice would be it's not as difficult as you think. I've generally, as I've spoken about earlier, I kind of go in pretty underprepared. and
Hmm.
it kind of exist when I'm there on a mixture of false bravado and dumb luck, which is tends to this point has served me really well. But I think that also offers the duality of bad things happening and really great things happening. And I think that enforces again a different kind of thought perspective rather than just that comfortable travel. So I would say don't do it the kind of classic comfortable way.
What lessons or insights about yourself and your craft did you take away from this experience, and just sort of any other challenging work that you've done?
I think something that I've been really leaning into on the lessons that I've been learning on these kind of things is really to lean into what I'm feeling and sit a little longer there. I mean, on this trip
Hmm.
particularly, I found that with the weather changing so drastically and so radically, I'd unpack all my gear, set up a beautiful frame. The weather would move. I'd chase the weather across a field, turn around to the frame I had set up, and that was exactly where it needed to be. So I'd lost that shot. So
Hmm.
I thinking definitely to slow down and sit longer, both with my work and myself, and be more patient is
Yeah.
kind of where I'm heading.
When you initially set out on this trip, had you always planned on it being 8 weeks, or did you, as you're going along on this trip, sort of continuously extend it and just kind of go with the flow?
I tend to give myself longer time. So this trip to the Himalayas was almost 3 months. So I think the more I do these journeys and these excursions, if you will, I find the longer I'm there, the longer I can understand the location and really get into sync with the space. So I think
Yeah.
3 months feels like a good time to be somewhere now.
So, looking towards the future, like, how do you see this trip to the Himalayas influencing the direction you want to take in your photography, and any future trips planned?
Yeah, I mean, I've just done a month road trip around the States and doing all the national parks. I really wanted to kind of get that classic Americana
Hmm.
traditional landscape dial. So I've just done a month in a car driving around and slept camping in a car. So I think the next thing is to sit down for a while and process and
Yeah.
figure out what I'm going to do next and how I'm going to unfold this work.
I really, really appreciated chatting with you today. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you both for the time and thank you for the invite. It's an honor.
Looking forward to really seeing like what you share next.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what it'll be.
Oh yeah. Who knows? Thank you so much.
All right. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
Jack Bailey is an internationally acclaimed landscape photographer who recently took a trip to the Himalayas on a motorcycle. We reached him in Guadalajara, Mexico. If you want to check out some of his incredible photography captured in the Himalayas, visit our website, designatlaspod.com. Email. It's one of those things we take for granted, like turning on the lights or clicking send. It's been around since the dawn of the internet, practically ancient by the tech standards, and yet it's still here, resilient and relevant. This past fall, at the Design Museum in London, MailChimp designed an exhibit to remind us that email isn't just alive, it's thriving. It's the reliable tool that stood the test of time, connecting us in ways that we often overlook. As you walk into the exhibit, the atmosphere is one of respect for this everyday marvel. Here, you're invited to see email as more than lines of text on a screen. It's a lifeline, a link to friends and family, a tool for business growth, and sometimes even a small work of art in its own right. This exhibit wants us to remember that every email, every subject line, every click is a chance to connect, to create, and to inspire. On one side of the exhibit, you'll find a display called the Inbox Timeline. It's a walk through history of email from its early days as a quick way for engineers to share ideas to the branded, personalized messages we see today. Each stop on the timeline highlights a different moment in email's evolution: the birth of the newsletter, the rise of HTML design, the power of analytics that helps us to see what resonates. It's a reminder that email has grown with us, adapting to our needs and changing with the times. Then, on the other side, there's the anatomy of an email, an interactive installation that lets you build your own message from scratch. As you select fonts, images, and colors, you realize just how much thought goes into each choice, how the right element can make a message memorable, inviting, and even joyful. You can experiment with tone and style, see how a playful subject line changes the feel of an email, and how visuals draw the reader in. You might think of email as something utilitarian, but here it feels like a craft. The exhibit even includes a space called The Stories That Stick. It's a collection of real messages from people who used email to change their lives. It's a wall of small victories, a business that found its first customers, an artist who built a following, a nonprofit that rallied support, all thanks to the humble email. Email has always had a mission about being accessible to everyone, giving even the smallest voices a platform. This exhibit isn't just a tribute to email's past, it's a look at its future. As other platforms come and go, email remains a constant, a space for creativity and connection. So, in a world of fleeting interactions, email is a place to slow down, to speak directly, to be seen. It's not just a message, it's a moment. So, maybe email is old, but it's also timeless, because connection, after all, never gets old. What if I told you that sawdust, the stuff that you sweep off the floor after a DIY fail, could revolutionize the ceramics industry? Sounds like a plot of a Netflix series, right? But for Studio Pai Pai and their trailblazing founder, Benedict Pedoten, it's just another day at the office. They've taken sawdust, mixed a bit of alchemy, okay, science, and turned it into a sustainable ceramic glaze that's as beautiful as it is eco-friendly. With a recipe fine-tuned over the past 3 years, Studio Pai Pai is saving up to 40 tons of dust per month, proving that even the dust from the Sagrada Familia figurines can find a second act as art. It's not just the dust that's keeping things, well, dusty. It's also the studio's approach to its packaging. From its quirky bags sewn from old tarps and eco labels printed on leftover paper stock, Benedict is on a mission to make design cleaner, greener, and dare we say, a bit more fabulous. Today, we're diving into the dust storm of innovation with Benedict Peroten to uncover how Studio Pai Pai is rewriting the ceramics rulebook and having a little fun while doing it. We've reached Benedict in Munich, Germany.
Benedict, why don't you start us off with a just quick intro about yourself and all that good stuff?
Yeah, my approach is to do healthy materials. I pretty like this word. So yeah, my background is more industrial design background. I was creating products and so on. Maybe we talk about this later as well. But yeah, so nowadays I want to focus on creating materials and closing the loop in material topics.
Very cool. So, what do you make? What are your materials? Let's start off there.
I mean, the story or the journey started with a glass I made from pizza ashes, so wood ashes from pizzerias, and seashells and quartz. And this was the first material I invented. Actually, it was a lot of fun, but also a lot of problems. And creating your first own material is also a big journey into a new field. So this was just the beginning, and then I started to invent more and more things. And I would say the biggest invention I made so far is my glaze. I would say I call it recycled glaze, even if it's wrong in the naming. But yeah, this is something I do. But I also focus on fibers and whatever comes around. I just want to do, let's say, sustainable materials.
Let's dive into your ceramic glaze. So our listeners will hear that you're using sawdust as a primary ingredient in your ceramic glaze. What made you consider sawdust?
I mean, the sawdust actually has perfect properties to do a glaze. But this I developed a little later. So in the beginning, I just found the resource of sawdust, which is just, I mean, the industry of the stonemasons, they just put it on landfill, and they have no use for it, of course, because I mean, they are selling stone products and whatever, and the stone dust they cannot use, even if it's the most expensive marble or whatever, they throw it away. And in the beginning, I just had the approach to use it, nothing more. I just wanted to use a resource, what is laying around. We had, I mean, in the beginning, it's, I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we had just a focus on, give it to the concrete industry or use it as a glass or whatever. But then after a while, we realized, okay, it has really, really good properties being a glaze. So it's melting pretty good, and you need not that much helping agents and so on. So actually, then we focused on a perfect recipe. It turns out it takes 3 years plus to do this.
Wow.
It was a really long story. And then I also tried to sell it to someone to produce it, because I never wanted to produce it my own. But I didn't find someone, and then I thought, okay, let's do it. And this is where we are.
Yeah. So what are those properties that make sawdust better than, say, other sorts of sustainable materials? Like, how is this glaze better than an alternative, like our traditional ceramic glaze?
I mean, for this, you need to understand how a normal glaze is made. And
Sure.
the most glazes in this world are made around quartz sand. So quartz sand is the main ingredient in, I don't know, almost any glaze. And you know that quartz sand is used in concrete and in glass and in many other things as well. And we're getting rid of it. So the world is using sand way too much, you know. So I've heard that after water, sand is actually the second resource we use most. So and the problem is on ordinary glazes that they're using, I mean, quartz sand, of course, but they're also using a lot of other resources we don't have endlessly, of course. It's like metal oxides, it's helping agents, it's limestone, there's a long list of ingredients you need. And the cool thing on sawdust or on stone dust is that the stones already contain a lot of quartz, so we don't need quartz sand. So this is one of the first glazes on the market which is not using quartz sand. And for me, this is the most important step we did. And then what is also very helpful is that these stones are melting pretty easy. So you don't need to add a lot of helpers in something. So when you want to melt down quartz sand, you need a lot of energy, or you need a lot of helping agents. And
Yeah.
the stones are melting pretty easy. And yeah, to control the quality, we add a little bit of other materials. But actually, the stones are, I don't know, it feels like they are made for being a glaze.
Could you, I guess maybe some of our listeners don't quite know or not as familiar with the world of ceramics, but could you just give us a brief explanation of like how glazes are important in the art of ceramics and in that world and what they could be used for there?
Sure. I mean, when you have a ceramic, let's say a plate or a cup or whatever, it's pretty rough in the texture and in the surface. So you glaze it like a cake or whatever. Similar use case. And the glaze on a ceramic is just creating a smooth surface. And then, of course, you can create colors and textures and whatever, and then this feels endlessly. But basically, it's just there to give you a smooth surface, which is also making it food safe. Or when you have tiles, you're able to run on it, to touch it, and so on. So it's just a surface on a ceramic.
Amazing. So we have read that when sawdust is sort of in supply for you, you use dust from stone craftsmen in Barcelona, including like dust from the figures that are on display at Sagrada Familia. What's the
Yes.
significance of recycling dust from iconic structures like the Sagrada Familia's figurines in this narrative of this glaze?
I mean, when I started to work with the sawdust, I was living in Barcelona as well.
Yeah.
And the stonemason in this area, his name is Arnau from Babani Artisan, a great guy, a really amazing guy. He was part of the research, actually. So he invited me to come around to have a look on on his company, and he spent a whole day to show me everything. I mean, there was no, like, how to say, for him, it was pretty useless. But
Yeah.
for me, it was changing everything. And the day when he invited me, and I was there, they created these figures for the Sagrada Familia. So they still do. They do it all the time. But when I was there, he gave me the sawdust and told me the story. And for me, it was really amazing to hold this, useless sawdust in hands and listening to his story. And then I thought, okay, this is something really interesting. So you have something with a really, really high value, and then there's a dust no one cares about. So let's bring it on the same level of value. So this is how the story starts, actually.
So, as I understand it, the packaging you're using is also a large component of Studio Pepe's distribution. What sort of
Yes.
response is it received from the industry?
I mean, at some point maybe we go a little too far, but
Yeah.
when you focus on solving a problem, there's no end. So you can always
Yeah.
solve something more. Um, so I mean, next to inventing materials, I always have a look on waste materials and residues from other companies, and I created a big network of companies and people and so on. And here and there, someone is calling me like, "Hey, I mean, can you come by? We have this and that in tons, in million of tons, in I don't know." And it's always the same, like, yeah, okay, I don't know, I need to come today, and then they say like, yeah, today, or we throw it away. And normally I go there and I pick up something. Normally not everything, but what I want to say is I started to collect things here and there. And when we invented the packaging of the glaze, I realized, okay, we have a lot of things in our storage what we can use for the packaging. For example, I was going to a climbing hall, and they have mats on the floor. So when you fall down, you fall on these mats. And they replace the flooring every second or third year. I don't remember.
Mhm.
So all of this flooring they throw away, and then they replace it just to have it in new.
Mhm.
And this flooring actually is the packaging of our 5 kilo bags. So
Wow.
I don't know. Actually, it doesn't make sense because it's a lot of work to sew them together. But I mean, it's more about telling a different story and showing people, okay, you can change something. It's pretty easy. Waste is everywhere, and you can use it. You just need to ask people. And this is what we want to show. If we grow, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see it at the moment. But if we grow into a big company, maybe we are not able to do this or continue with this. But as long as we can, I want to try to do recycling in every sector of producing these clays.
There's a lot of materials in this world that you can use to
Yes,
recycle
yes.
and to revamp and distribute in a different way. I love that. So as you look to the future, what innovations is your studio exploring in the ceramic process, glazes, or are there just like alternative production methods or materials on the horizon? What else are you guys doing next?
Actually, we're changing a little bit at the moment because
Sure.
the glaze is just one thing we wanted
Mhm.
to show, or it's just an example. Let's say it's a good
Yeah.
example, or hopefully a good example of alternative ways of creating an industrial product. But in the future, I focus more on helping manufacturing companies to change something. So I don't wanna do
Mhm.
everything on my own, because I mean I'm also just one person, and I have the same time on the day to do something. So I cannot do everything on my own. But there are a lot of companies which are producing something, and they already exist. I don't need to invent everything new. So
Mhm.
my idea is to help others to create material cycles, or maybe to use the waste, or maybe to sell the waste to a neighbor industry that they can use it, and so on. And for this, I had a lot of meetings this year with a lot of companies, big ones and small ones, and European ones and international ones. And at the moment, I can't say where the journey is going, but there. I mean, I cannot tell too much, but
That's okay. That's all right. That's
um,
all right.
there are some interesting things coming up. Hopefully,
Yeah.
you never
Yeah.
know. But I think this is kind of the final direction we want to go,
Mhm.
like helping others. Yeah.
So from your perspective, what do you just find most rewarding about the work that you do?
Ooh, that's a good question. Actually, I like to be able to do things on my own, and I also like when other creatives create their own materials. Maybe in
Mhm.
the example of the ceramic industries, there are a lot of ceramists creating their own glazes, and I think
Mhm.
this is amazing. So I mean, there are not many crafts you can create your own materials. So
Right.
in the metal industry, or maybe I don't know, a carpenter or something, they're not creating materials. They know pretty good how to work with, but they not,
Yeah.
like they're not creating it. And the ceramic industry, for example, it's really amazing because you can create your own glazes. There are a million of recipes, and you don't need to buy that. So I
Mhm.
mean, you can go around the corner, collect some. I don't know. I've seen a lot of things. You can
Yeah.
collect some dust on the streets and glaze your cup with this, and it works. So this is something I really like, that people start to use what they have around and
Mhm.
start to do their own things. Instead of
Yeah.
buying something. I mean, this is way more interesting if you create your own things, your own materials, or maybe your own products or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
I hope this answers your question.
No, absolutely. This is great. Oh, I love it. Okay, Benedict. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for all of this.
Thank you for having me, and good luck in the future with your podcasts.
Benedict Pirotin is the founder of Studio Pai, working on developing more sustainable glaze for ceramics. We reached him in Munich, Germany. Flags. We see them in stadiums, on landmarks, and in parades. They're symbols of identity, of pride, of belonging, and in the digital age, they're also in our pockets. You know, as those emojis. But if you've ever wondered why your phone has every national flag, but not one for your city, or why some flags don't seem to reflect the world you know, you're not alone. At the intersection of technology and culture, flag emojis have become a surprising focal point in the conversation about identity and its representation. Today's emojis cover a lot of ground. Countries, regions, even the pirate flag emoji made it in. Yet, despite their widespread use, flag emojis present a unique challenge. They don't just represent places, they're deeply tied to culture, to politics, and social identities. And in a world of over 200 nations and thousands of cultures, who gets to decide which flags are represented?
So people text a lot. And 92% of the world's online population use emoji. And one of the beautiful things about emoji is that they operate alongside the language you already speak. They aren't a language unto themselves. If they were, it would be a very hard language to learn. And that's the best part, is that you don't have to learn it. You just use them, and it works.
That's Jennifer Daniel, a key voice in emoji design who's been thinking about this question. Her recent work explores how we can make emoji sets more inclusive and adaptable, not just limited to nations, but open to symbols that reflect a broader, more complex world. Because while the flag emoji set may seem complete, it only tells part of the story. Imagine a future where flag emojis go beyond borders to represent communities, regions, or even ideas, symbols that speak to more personal forms of identity. A pride flag, a local flag, or even flags that capture cultural nuances that don't fit nearly within national lines. As emojis continue to evolve, designers like Jennifer are challenging the limitations of these symbols and asking how can they better reflect our diverse, interconnected world. And yet, with all this potential for growth, a surprising decision has emerged. The Unicode Consortium, which manages emoji standards, has chosen to stop accepting proposals for new flag emojis. And can you guess the reason? Flags have proven to be highly political symbols that can be divisive or exclusionary. The challenge of choosing which flags to include, how to handle new regions, communities, and identities proved too complex and far too controversial to manage within the emoji set. But all hope is not lost. In place of those traditional flag emojis, the emoji community is looking toward other symbols that could represent identities, movements, and places without the limitations of rigid borders. We might see more icons for communities, different symbols that speak to shared experiences, or even customizability that allows users to create their own unique representation. Because while flags may no longer be added, our digital language can still evolve to capture who we are and how we connect. So here's to the future of flag emojis. Here's to a more flexible, inclusive set of symbols that celebrates not only nations, but communities, cultures, and everything in between. Because at the end of the day, a flag, whether on a pole or on a screen, isn't just a design. It's a way to say, I'm here and I'm part of this. And in an ever-evolving world, that's a message worth sending. You've been listening to the Design Atlas podcast. Our show can be heard every other Thursday on your favorite podcasting app.
And you can always read more about the stories and conversations we feature on Design Atlas by visiting our website, designatlaspod.com. I'm Megan Lutke.
And I'm Jens Springsjord. Good night.